So I had an end of year rant, but now it's the beginning of the year. It's games related, and so I figured I'd put it here. I wrote it out, and I thought I liked how it was written, but as you could guess by the logos, this is going to have to do with Owlcat, Larian. We'll mention Diablo 4 a very little bit, and then we have some other CRPGs to just sort of hammer home the point that we're trying to talk about. Specifically, we're going to start by talking about the reviews and reports coming in about Rogue Trader. Specifically, how it is a traditional Owlcat buggy mess with constant stops to your ability to progress through the game. But don't worry, everyone who loves Owlcat says, and you've got an add on called Toy Box that will help you progress through the game. Having played through Pathfinder, Kingmaker, and Wrath of the Righteous, I've used Toy Box because even in those years old games, you need this third party add on to reliably make it through a single playthrough without something breaking. It may be minor things like companion flags, major things like the inability to enter the next act, but Toy Box is a necessary thing for most people's playthroughs of Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous. It's already been adapted for Rogue Trader because Owlcat has learned. I'd love to say they've learned nothing from the failure of Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous. They've learned from the successes. They know how to do those games well, but they've learned nothing from the parts that failed. So these are existing bugs that existed in those games that are now being reported in Rogue Trader. So, what does this tell us? Well, that you can lose hours of progress, have to reset your entire save, and so we don't have a bug light game in Owlcat. So, again, before we get to the main thesis, I want to pivot to a less egregious example in Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 was also a less than stellar release. The game itself was good. It was filled with bugs, things that didn't work as they should, and Larian has basically acknowledged that they agree with this with their constant updates and releases to improve the initial game, from adding proper epilogue, fixing the romance options for several of the characters, and realizing that their non lethal damage didn't properly work on several NPCs, and going in and finding ways to make these things work. They fixed the opening from what I've seen. So when I did the opening, Karlak was just standing up in the pod, clipping through it instead of laying in it and getting up. A bunch of clipping errors have slowly been fixed. A lot of things like that. So Larian has been trying to fix their flawed release. Larian's got a better reputation than Owlcat when it comes to fixing things. Divinity 2, much better now than it was at release. Never played Divinity 1, but I know from people who have, same story. Larian fixes things better than Owlcat fixes them. The less we say about Diablo 4, the better, but again, Season 2 is a much better state than it was at release. I think maybe even Resistance's work now. I don't know. I haven't played since I finished the campaign. But here we have some examples over there. These are all fairly modern games in the last year that all had horrible release dates compared to what they should be, with Baldur's Gate 3 being the least egregious example. But I wanted to grab it because it also won Game of the Year. So I want you to see that this is not just big companies like Blizzard or anything like that. Every game, and we will give huge passes to games that have bad releases, buggy releases. A lot of people couldn't even clear Act 3 for a good long while until Larian patched it. And that, folks, is what we gave Game of the Year to from several awards. So, if we want games to release without needing third party add ons, without needing a few weeks or months of patches to get through the game. Gamers need to change their behavior. I am as much a victim of this as any of you because I know all of this about Baldur's Gate 3 and Diablo 4 because I played them. Rogue Trader is sitting installed waiting for me to finish getting through Act 3 of Baldur's Gate 3 so that I can play it. I am as guilty of this as the millions of people buying these other games. But the simple fact is, like, look at the other two examples we have Pillars of Eternity and Sword Coast Legends. They released, and they were in less than ideal states, and their developers got bloody noses over it. Sword Coast Legends developer kind of died because of how poorly implemented the multiplayer was in Sword Coast Legends and how the campaign was a generally lackluster thing, and all of the problems that if you go watch the full playthrough of Sword Coast Legends, you'll notice. So why don't we want to give Larian Studios, Owlcat, or Blizzard a sales black eye? Because if you want to stop receiving buggy games on release, we have to stop buying broken, buggy games on release, and we have to stop falling for pre-orders, years long, early access. And so when I'm saying that you have to bloody their noses, we don't need to go as extreme as with the Sword Coast Legends developers and kill the studio. But I also don't mean slightly below average sales numbers or a slow start like we had with Diablo 4. I mean that game reviewers and game purchasers. Now, none of this really applies to the indie scene. People are rightly a little more tolerant of indie games having some issues. Also, indie games are a little more agile and fix their problems a lot quicker. So all of this is dealing with large major studios that are making the games that people are buying in mass. So you want them to start giving you games at release that are like Baldur's Gate 3 is now, or any other game a few months into their patch cycle, or like Wrath of the Righteous 3 years or so, however many years. When was Wrath of the Righteous released? However many years. Wrath of the Righteous release date September 2021. Okay, so 2 years. 2 years into their release cycle, and Wrath of the Righteous is in a playable state. They're still occasionally putting out patches that fix things like a subclass major feature didn't work and now it does. But we're getting there. We're getting there with Wrath of the Righteous. So we need to stop making excuses for large companies that release broken games. You've probably heard this from a lot of people, but I don't mean we like grumble about it in a video like this. We grumble about it on Twitter. I mean, we need game reviewers to stop giving reviews like they gave Larian at release. Baldur's Gate 3 on release was a 7 to 8 out of 10, maybe a 6 out of 10 if you're a little more critical, maybe a 9 out of 10 if you tolerate having to go outside the game to fix things, which we never should. Anytime you have to do something outside of a game to enjoy a game, it's a failure of the game. So maybe you don't have to go. In my initial write up, I was like, we should go Scorched Earth, 0 out of 10, unplayable. But maybe not that much. I've moderated this since the end of the year. This is 2024. This is a kinder, gentler year. But the next buggy CRPG mess that gets shoveled out early with multiple act breaks that just don't work, we need that to get 0 out of 10s from reviewers. We need reviewers, if they reach Act 3 in Baldur's Gate and hit the bugs that existed in the original build where you just couldn't progress, that's a game-stopping bug. Why are you giving games with game-stopping bugs that are prevalent enough that people are trying to find workarounds with add-ons or third-party tools? Why did that get a 10 out of 10? Was Baldur's Gate 3 good? Yes, I'm pretty far into Act 3. I think it's really good. But the release date of the game should never have gotten a 10 out of 10. Because that is our measuring point. Oh, what's a 10 out of 10 game of the year? A game that you just sometimes can't complete and have to restart your 100-hour save because the game just it didn't work, but 10 out of 10. No. We have to start grading things not on the curve of oh we're the internet, we can fix it. PC Master Race, we can outdo their slow patch cycle with our own mods. That's not good enough for a 10 out of 10. Now, maybe I could see a good argument that current existing Baldur's Gate 3 pretty close to a 10 out of 10, and maybe a 10 out of 10 if you're a little more forgiving of the odd graphical glitch here or there, or the combat that's a little wonky at times, and the things like that. So I could accept a 10 out of 10 today for Baldur's Gate 3. At release, no. And any reviewer who gave Baldur's Gate 3 a 10 out of 10 at release, you need to question them as much as you would question someone who is giving Diablo 4 super high scores on release. These larger corporations have not learned that they need to release good, solid products. They've learned that if they stamp ready for release on something, there are going to be a lot of game reviewers who give it a pass, game players and buyers who will buy it. I've been part of that problem because I was dumb. I've yet to play Rogue Trader. Maybe the bugs won't be so bad when I get there. But I've played Kingmaker and I've played Wrath of the Righteous. Owlcat doesn't have a whole lot of trust in me, or trust from me. Larian and Owlcat have both shown that if you give them enough time, they can eventually get to what we would like to see in a released game. But do you think that Larian learned from their what was it, 3-year long, 2-year long, year long early access that we should release complete, bug free, feature perfect games? Or do you think they learned, look at the low mark we need to get Game of the Year? If we release something that people can't actually finish, that's Game of the Year. That's not the message I think we want to be sending. Now, I've been critical of Baldur's Gate 3, but I want to stress it was not nearly as bad as Kingmaker or Wrath of the Righteous are now, and it's not as egregious as Diablo 4 was at release. And it's certainly a much better game than Sword Coast Legends, and I would say it's a better game than Pillars of Eternity, but if you like the real-time with pause aspect of the old Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, maybe you'll like Pillars of Eternity more than Baldur's Gate 3. But the point is, I could have made this same rant when Dragon Age Origins came out. I don't know how many of you remember I guess that first cutscene just crashes. Here's how you could skip the cutscene to get to the game, or you could wait for us to patch it. If you don't remember that, maybe it wasn't as big of an issue as I remember, but I remember being stuck on that first cutscene for a long time until I figured out how to force the game to skip it so I could play the game. And that was Dragon Age Origins. I think I was just fresh out of college when that happened. That was a long time ago. And we're now still having games that are broken at release. Baldur's Gate 3 is a success story because they fixed, I think, pretty much everything that was broken about it is fixed now. Now they're going in and they're able to do content patches like, hey, you know what? Maybe if you knock out Minthara, the game won't treat her as dead. They're able to do these things that should have been ready at release, but deadlines and things are an issue, and they're just a small indie studio. But the point is, that much like the other small indie studio, Blizzard, still can't get us stash tabs or working resists. We should expect better. This is a rant you're going to hear from pretty much anyone who talks gaming. You've heard this rant. You've probably made this rant. But the real answer has to be that we stop giving passes even to game studios we like, even to game studios that give us products we like. CRPGs for a good long while needed a renaissance. I think we're pretty much there at this point between, again, as much as Rogue Trader is probably a buggy mess, Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous were good once you fought with the game enough to get to the point where you could play them. So again, this is just the beginning slash end of year rant. Uh, I don't know what the real answer is because I know gamers, as I have proven time and again, won't just not buy something. They'll buy it and work around it. They'll buy it and suffer through a couple of crashes here and there every day. But gamers buying it is a problem. But the other problem is people who review games need to stop grading on a curve. You gotta stop saying that things that are a 10 out of 10 include things that a good chunk of players physically won't be able to complete. Not because it's long, not because it's hard, not because they need to get good, but because sometimes Act 3 just doesn't load. That's what we need to really have happen on a grand scale. Gamers like me need to stop being dumb, and reviewers and games journalists need to start actually holding people accountable for bad game design, not just for all of the other things that Blizzard is needs to be taken into account for. So there it is, end of the year, beginning of the year rant. Not much more to say than that. I should come up with better layouts, but I'm not very good at YouTube. So there we are.